I'm delighted to introduce the next session, The Future of Technology Policy as Domain of Scholarship. My name is Alicia Ouyang, and I'm a dual master's student in MIT's Technology and Policy program in computer science, graduating in 2026, specializing in data and AI ethics and policy. My research focuses on evaluation of how privacy algorithms impact public policy decisions using synthetic census population datasets, specifically the 2010 US Census. This session invites a bold, forward-looking dialogue on the evolving role of technology policy as a dynamic, interdisciplinary domain of scholarship that engages with the complex challenges and opportunities of the 21st century, while contributing to responsible technological innovation, deployment, and societal impact. We are joined today by a distinguished panel of scholars whose work spans engineering, policy, design, and complex systems. First, I would like to introduce this panel's moderator, Andrew Jones. Andrew Jones is Assistant Professor of Civil and Environmental Engineering at Duke University. He is an expert in environmental health engineering, fluid dynamics, and the study of transport at biological interfaces, with applications in biofilm treatment, water quality monitoring, and environmental justice. Dr. Jones is the founder of the Systems for Engaging the Environment Lab, which aims to solve global challenges in water and health using engineering and policy analysis, which includes studying how external stresses impact biofilm formation, viability, and susceptibility, with applications towards infection, medical devices, food, water, and wastewater treatment systems. And first on the panel is Babak Hedari, Associate Professor in the Department of Mechanical and Industrial Engineering and Affiliate of Faculty at the School of Public Policy and Urban Affairs and the Network Science Institute at Northeastern University. As Director of the Multi-Agent Intelligent Complex Systems, MAGICS Lab, Dr. Hedari's interdisciplinary research aims at establishing a bridge between engineering system design and computational social sciences, where he uses network science to study the architecture and uses AI agents for modeling and governance of socio-technical systems, platform-based sharing economy systems, and co-evolution of structure and behavior in complex systems. Next, we have Sunand Bhattacharya, who is Professor and Associate Vice Provost for Design and Innovation Strategies at Boston College, where he leads initiatives to foster a future-forward culture of collaborative research and innovation using design-driven methodologies. He has 30 years of experience in the public and private sectors related to design and engineering education, focusing on the integration of creative mental tools, critical design processes, and digital technology. Professor Bhattacharya has also spearheaded the development of Boston College's new human-centered engineering program and has held leadership roles at Autodesk, Franklin Allen College of Engineering, and the Massachusetts College of Art and Design. Finally, our final panelist is Erica Fuchs, the Director of Critical Technology Initiative and a Kavčić-Moura Professor in the Department of Engineering and Public Policy at Carnegie Mellon University. Her research focuses on the development, commercialization, and global manufacturing of emerging technologies and national policy in that context. As Director of the Critical Technology Initiative at Carnegie Mellon, Dr. Fuchs is bringing together interdisciplinary expertise across 5 schools to pioneer how advanced analytics can ensure we smartly invest in and enact policies to achieve competitiveness in technologies critical to national security, economic competitiveness, and the well-being of all citizens. Please join me in welcoming this distinguished panel. I now turn the conversation over to our moderator, Dr. Andrew Jones, who will guide us through today's session.
Thank you very much, Alicia. So I want to kick it off by just asking this broad question, kind of getting to the meat of the conversation. What should be the defining characteristics of technology policy as a distinct academic discipline and profession for the 21st century? So give, I don't know, the audience who might be trying to start a technology and policy department, for those that don't have one, give them a nice blurb. Whoever wants to start.
It's a great pleasure to be here. I'm not a TPP alum. I'm more like a modeling person. So I model complex systems, the behavior of complex systems, and especially the evolution and co-evolution of the social and technical side of the systems. So I will share some perspectives based on what I think that we can bring in from that world. So I will mention 3 challenges that I think 21st century technology policy is facing, and then I'll share 3 potential pathways to tackle those challenges. So the first one is our systems, our socio-technical systems are becoming increasingly co-evolutionary, so which means that the social side and the technical side are co-evolving with each other. So the interaction of the social and technical is not something new. It's been there forever. So, but mostly it's been technology influencing people's behavior, and it's been also kind of like static, low frequency. Now we have a high frequency, like very fast paced interaction, but also it's bi-directional. The technology changes human behavior, but also human behavior changes the technology at the same time, and it's high frequency. And we can think of some examples. I think the most important example, the most prominent example is this Gen AI these days. That the basically Gen AI LLMs are created based on human-generated text, but also it also changes the way that we interact with each other, and it affects the social norms, and then it affects the next generation of human-generated text, and then that co-evolutionary cycle goes on. So we need to understand that, and that, if in a mathematical form, that creates some kind of like non-stationarity assumption into our modeling, and makes everything very hard. So we need to understand both sides at the same time. The second challenge, I would say, is the integration or alignment of top-down interventions and policy with the bottom-up responses. So, and that's something that is becoming also very important. The bottom-up used to be just the social, but also now the bottom-up is also technical because of these AI agents that are being integrated into the system. So we need to understand not just so any measured top-down intervention or policy or governance that we want to design need to anticipate the type of behavioral responses in terms of adaptation, learning, emergent social norms around that intervention in order for that to be successful, because top-down and bottom-up can be aligned, or sometimes top-down might generate some effect that the bottom-up works against it. We saw a lot of examples during COVID, for example, but also there are other examples in technology platforms as well. So, and then the third challenge is more relevant to platforms, digital platforms, and that's the what to expect, what to delegate to policy, kind of like top-down interventions, and what to delegate to governance of these platforms. So kind of like when think of governance as a middle out. So we talked about bottom up, and top-down governance can be considered as middle out. So I'll be quick on the pathways. So the first pathway is, I would like to, this is, of course I'm biased here, but to advocate for going towards building next generation computational models to build something effectively as a policy sandbox, right? So because a lot of these complex dynamics that I mentioned before require some kind of environment to test and simulate these effects. But the current computational modeling methods, they are not sufficient to do this, so we need to move towards that. The second thing which is related, the second pathway is moving from static policy to adaptive policy. And adaptive policy is basically sensing the environment, sensing getting feedback from the status of the system, both top down and bottom up, and middle out, and then adjust the policies based on that. And finally, something that I have been doing quite a bit of research recently on, using AI agents to create kind of like both of these measures. So the AI agents, as LLMs are shown to be able to capture the behavior of human agents and decision-making agents with a lot of caveats, but there's possibility there, and we can use that for capturing the behavior of the agents, but also we can use AI agents to implement that adaptive policy intervention, something like reinforcement learning agents. In the other questions, I'll be happy to talk more about these three pathways.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Sunand Bhattacharya, as I was introduced. So I'm with Boston College, and as you know, Boston College was traditionally a liberal arts college till about 2018 and 19, when we started bringing about change. And to your question, in terms of how, if one is considering a program in policy like TPP over there, what would we do? So just a little bit of background. I came from the private sector, and there were certain advantages I had in terms of implementation. So my office, which is the Design and Innovation Strategies, it brings about some of the new programs that we have. BC had never had engineering before. It's liberal arts, humanities, social sciences, and the natural sciences. So to bring about change with a new program is always a challenge in academia. One of the first things we brought was called human-centered engineering. And the reason why, this was in 2018 when we proposed it, we wanted to build on the BC ethos. And also, we intentionally did not create a school of engineering. We put engineering in the College of Liberal Arts. And the intent of that is, can we graduate students who have respect and regard to other disciplines, blur the boundaries, and are problem solvers, equipped with the tools of design-driven methodologies as well as implementation science, the consequences of what you do. So even when I practice those things on a day-to-day basis, Babak used the term bottom-up and top-down. Just the term policy, program, governance, and we were just chatting about it, conjures up something that's top-down, something that is being imposed upon you, something that you have to follow rules. So, and that creates a different impression, just terminology, the semantics of it. The other side of it is going bottom-up. And how bottom do we go? How low? So for the engineering, for example, I'm just going to draw a parallel between the two. We looked at 8th graders, because by the time it was going to be implemented, we want to talk to their parents, the stakeholders, other people who kind of go, we're using design thinking methods. And the next generation, Generation Alpha, Generation Z, that's already there, coming up, are equipped, are wired quite differently. So when they come into higher education, how are they solving problems? How, compared to what I did, it was a very siloed world. So from a program point of view, we had to kind of take a look at our own selves. Are we ready for that student? And if not, what changes do we need to make? So we made a few changes at BC, which are policy program driven. And the engineering, human-centered engineering was one. But then also we wanted to bring about inclusive design-driven processes coupled with implementation science, and starting right from the foundation program. So we introduced something called complex problems, enduring questions, in which a historian and an engineer can collaborate, or a social scientist as well as a designer. There are all kinds of cross-pollination. They have to give a proposal. That actually, as a foundational course across the board, has helped us a lot. So the bottom-up is actually based on these foundational programs, is better prepared than what they used to be. What it used to be is more siloed approach. So as a culture, how do we change ourselves? So we've had to, in 2030, what will it be like? So, and then also looking at what fails. So if you're to address, I mean, there are existing policy programs that are there. In fact, we just started something called the Schiller Institute of Science and Society. And society is part of that. The whole investment has been made in terms of a chemist, an environmental scientist working with other social sciences. So the precedence has been set Now, if you were to bring a new program that is policy-driven, governance-driven, but as David Clark pointed out, it's not just about the regulations, it's about the experience. I mean, our approach is, how can we bring that experience, equip these students with better problem solving and collaboration skills, and democratize this whole policy program in a way that the average student from any other college, not from MIT, I'm talking about even community college students, et cetera, if you ask them a question, what does policy program mean for you? Would they be able to articulate it or not? Or is it something that somebody else did up there? So those are some of the approaches we are taking right now for that.
Okay, so academia at its best is about curiosity and the search for truth. It's about asking, how am I wrong? I remember still a student coming to me once and being like, it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And I was like, what do you mean it doesn't work? And she's like, our hypothesis is wrong. I was like, great, like, let's figure out what's going on here. It's probably more interesting. On the National Academy's concrete, in the marble of the concrete, it says, and I'm not going to get this quote right, I just want to be very clear about this. It has a quote by Einstein, I'm misquoting Einstein, but something to the effect of that those who seek the truth have the responsibility to seek the whole truth, and not just the convenient truth. And again, I'm sorry Einstein. So I wanna take you on a short journey in response to your question. I graduated from the technology policy program, and I was grandfathered into the engineering systems division. I actually gave a talk about why I thought the engineering systems division was going to fail as a graduate student in the way that only a graduate student can when you don't yet understand all the politics that are going on. And basically, what I want to talk about first is I came out. And I remember being interviewed by Harvard and being interviewed by MIT, and basically them all saying to me, what you're doing is too risky. It's too risky, but we want to stay in touch and we'll come back in 5 years. And I thought, well, how am I going to eat for the next 5 years? Or where am I going to get a job? And Granger Morgan at the Department of Engineering and Public Policy at Carnegie Mellon, which has at its greatest had 90 doctoral students and faculty who are jointly appointed between engineering and almost many, many other colleges around the entire school, including joint with engineering programs, said, well, why don't you come down here? So what is the Engineering and Public Policy Program? The focus of the Engineering and Public Policy Program is policy problems where the technical details matter. And more recently, I'm going to just jump several decades forward. I am, as it was already noted, fortunate enough to not only be a chaired professor, not only be a member of the National Bureau of Economic Research, not only to have served on national boards. Why do I tell you this? Is because Carnegie Mellon is uniquely receptive to creating new fields. And I don't know exactly, I'm still trying to figure out exactly what that means, but I think it comes back to asking, how am I wrong? So, for example, Carnegie Mellon created early on the field of machine learning, and I am now co-leading an initiative, the Critical Technology Initiative, asking how do we more smartly invest in and enact policies in technology critical to national security, economic competitiveness, and the well-being of all citizens, which is across 5 schools. So why am I telling you this? So let's come back and forgive my non-linearity for the moment, we'll get there. So let's come back to my TPP and PhD experience. It was people like Frank Field who helped me keep asking, how am I wrong? How is the field wrong? Who helped me continue to search for truth. So in my first piece of work, and not ask exactly how the disciplines might constrain me in facing that question, that problem. So in my first work on offshoring and technology trajectories, I was using engineering models, and I realized that when you changed manufacturing location, every single variable in the model seemed to change. And that changes the economic incentives for the development of technology, which became interesting to folks in the economics community because that also undermines general theories of gains from trade. I then was like, well, let's go back out into the field and let's see what's going on. And I had the opportunity to say, wait, DARPA is funding emerging technologies. It's funding actually the exact technologies that just moved manufacturing overseas. And I ended up writing a paper with guidance from people who did qualitative work. I got to take from Susan Silby work on ethnographic techniques and so forth. I got to write a paper also published on how DARPA program managers re-architect social networks to influence technology outcomes. And then much later in my career, I was out there in the field and I asked, I'm really bothered by how the economists in their measurement of technology basically and you know, in some ways they measure capital expenditures, they measure other number of robots, how that may actually be giving us a misunderstanding of the relationship between technology and labor outcomes. That actually technology could have many different labor outcomes. And our problem was the measurement of technology, not necessarily technology itself. And so we wrote a paper showing that when you looked across technologies, that certain technologies leaded to wage and skill convergence, not to wage and, well, actually we only were able to measure skills. Let me come back there. Skill convergence, not just a skill polarization. So why do I say that? Well, when in building, I have no idea if we're really building a new field in the Critical Technology Initiative, but what we've been asking is, okay, what do we know about information systems? What do we know about market systems? What do we know about human systems? What do we know about technical systems? And what are the blind spots of the discipline? So one faculty, we're bringing together psychologists and behavioral scientists and engineers and economists and who have I forgotten? I've forgotten people, political scientists, and the founder of the machine learning department, and saying, and actually one of the decision scientists has written a book called Bounded Disciplines for Unbounded Problems. So how do we ask the question of where each of us is wrong? Because fundamentally we're all wrong, right? The partial equilibrium models or the general equilibrium models, we're not always in equilibrium, or our measurement of certain data doesn't lead to other data. And in that pursuit of truth, and asking, so I'll give you an example from a discipline building session this summer where we spent 10 hours together asking how we were all wrong. So what are the sources of information and their limits? That's what we thought maybe students might need to know. What are the possible models that we could use to understand this problem, and what are their limits? How do the technical and sectoral details matter in our understanding of this problem? So in the best of worlds, academia is a pursuit, it's curiosity, it's asking how am I wrong, it's the pursuit of truth. I'm not saying we're always in the best of all worlds, but I do think that in stepping forward in these times, and I want to comment, I have, in my time, when I was in grad school, I lost my brother to cancer. I later lost my father to an aneurysm. And I have, at a point in time when I was leading a different initiative at Carnegie Mellon, stepped down because I could not have led the faculty where they were going for what I was being asked to do. And in these times, I believe the thing that will pull us through when we're having problems of networks, when we're having problems of trust, when we're having problems of power and greed. And I'll tell one more story you may not know, but in addition to having the chance to spend time in China, I also, my father on his mother's side actually, they spent, that family was in the former East Germany. And I had the chance twice as a child to go over there, and they were unable to, they did not join the Communist Party. As a consequence, their children were unable to go to university. They raised rabbits and had a huge garden in their backyard because they were unable to get fresh produce in the local grocery store. I watched my grandparents' car be dismantled in order to go through the border, their Volkswagen, which was a rental, because they were worried that they would be stealing people out. And so I would ask you who you are, what's your integrity, what's your relationship and desire for power or for money, and who is it that you can step forward to, and in these times, what can you do to build trust?
Awesome. So I think, one, in the interest of time, I want to get some short answer questions out because we have, well, no, it's all of us. It's, I think we are all standing in between us and lunch. So I want to try to get some quick answers, try to answer some of the questions that might be on our mind with this future of technology. And a lot of you all brought up this concept of trust. You just ended actually on the concept of trust. And so how/should technology policy as a field, as a discipline, be used to build trust in the things that are being, in either the technology that's coming out or the policies that are coming out? And who wants to kind of take that?
I mean, to your question, actually, a couple of other terms come to mind. Trust, ethics. Are we intentionally raising students, graduating them with ethics as one of the underlying principles, reflection and discernment that come along with it? And then authenticity. Trust, again, is the technology, is the solution, because there's so much information coming in, a delta factor of things changing on it's such short time. 2022, ChatGPT came out. Today we have Grok and all the other ones, Gemini, they're coming. And it's changing our outlook towards how we approach problems. So to your point, I think that's one of the things to take into consideration. Can be graduate students, and I'm talking middle-tier students, with some of these things so that policy implementation is ethical, and the tension between good solution versus ethical solution.
So in professionalization, one of the things that people consider professions would be things that, disciplines that have licensure, right? So things like lawyers, doctors, engineers, we all get licensed and we're accountable to boards, which builds a certain set of trust. In technology policy as a field, should we go in that direction of trying to license the next set of technology policy graduates, or should we, or researchers, should that be the angle that we take, or what angles could we take to really, in addition to adding ethics, which even the previous panel mentioned as kind of ethics being the forefront of what we should be talking about, how should we really attack this question of building trust in even the models?
I'm actually going to twist. Your trust question is very interesting, and I'm going to twist it, and someone else should feel free to answer it. But I'm actually looking at the second original question, because I told you I was most comfortable with those questions. it says what reciprocal opportunities exist for cross-disciplinary integrated research and education for policy-informed engineering and technically informed policy. And I just want to talk about a very quick example, and this may or may not, you can decide if you think it has to do with trust, because I think it does in a certain sense. I think one of my early motivations in thinking about the Critical Technology Initiative, which I'm leading, is critical for what, right? And so both the question of is it critical for national security, and how do we measure that? Is it critical for economic competitiveness, and how do we measure that? Is it critical for societal well-being, whether that be health, the environment, privacy, if that is a measure? And then if we could measure those, which we probably can't, there's a beautiful, and we definitely can't perfectly. There's a beautiful book by Benoit Godin, who's unfortunately passed, a historian who talks about how measures are used to the measurement of science, it's a history book, and how it leads to like patents or publications to sort of incentivizing science instead of other outcomes. But I think that when we're talking about these individual possible, whether they're national objectives or personal citizen objectives, everyone probably wants security, everyone probably wants their own well-being for all citizens, their health. How can we show and make transparent trade-offs to the best that we're able between those objectives? So how can we show, for example, that here people who really care about climate, if the legislators are supposed to be representing the people and our decision makers, and people who really care about national security aren't really at odds, that they actually would both want to do the same thing, or people who have private profit incentives and people who care, I'm just using climate for a moment here, about climate might both want to do the same thing. A lot of some of the research I've been undertaking right now tries to come to the question of how can we visualize these trade-offs or win-wins between potential, let's just call them objectives for the well-being of citizens, policy objectives, government objectives, and how can we, by making that more transparent, maybe say, are we asking the wrong question? And how can we embed our understanding of what technology really can and cannot do in those systems into those questions?
Awesome. So, Babak, I actually want to kind of piggyback off that comment of what new interdisciplinary or cross-disciplinary fields, and you mentioned a computational sandbox, right? That this computational sandbox might be useful for increasing that frequency of coevolution of socio-technological solutions. So what opportunities do you see outside of kind of technological governance, or governance of, I wouldn't say out of computational tools, but outside of computational tools, what other things might a computational sandbox help us with?
So I'll start with that statement about the moving towards more adaptive policy and interventions, both in terms of kind of like government policy, but also technology governance. So in most cases, when we want to create some adaptive measure, we are basically creating some kind of sequential decision making that adapts each decision, each stage of the decision to the feedback from the previous stage, right? So, and that requires some kind of, these days mostly implemented using some kind of reinforcement learning. So, and that's something that these platform companies like Uber, Airbnb, they use all the time. And the reason that they can use it all the time is that the training data that they use for this comes from millions of experiments, millions of transactions every second that they receive. But in a lot of policy decisions, we don't have that luxury. So we need to train that adaptive policy or governing agent using some kind of digital environment. And that digital environment is something that is a combination of rational actors, like firms, if we call them rational, and a lot of behavioral actors like humans, and these days also LLM, these AI agents. So that computational sandbox is an environment that can be used to train these, let's say, governing agents, and then those governing agents can then be fielded in the real world, and then with some fine tuning, the hope is that the training cost and training speed is going to be minimized. We have looked at a few. We have several papers on showing the limits of using AI agents, LLM agents, as proxies for human decision making, both in terms of making decisions within the context of and introducing heterogeneity, realistic heterogeneity into the set of agents, and also showing that there are opportunities but also limitations in showing some theory of mind, and that is very much needed in interactions and a strategic decision making. So this is one of those fields, those areas that I think, since we're moving to talking about the future of the field, these types of computational thinking and computational modeling, and then linking it to these top-down interventions and adaptive policies and governance. That's, I think, that link is something that can be one of the pillars of the future of the field.
Awesome. And I guess, Sunand, seeing as you said that you all have launched kind of these new programs in human-centered engineering, so I'm going to toss this almost maybe the last question. I hopefully might be able to get in another one. But what new institutional forms and funding mechanisms are really required to advance the work that the rest of the panelists have really been talking about?
So in today's world, funding is kind of a mystery thing out there. So a lot of us who are dependent on federal funds for many of these things are right now looking for private funds. But we have, in our case, we've been doing some work in Rwanda. I'm just going to give you an example. Harnessing technology for mental health, so healthcare, for mental health intervention. But to do that, as you were saying, we need to have data so that Rwanda needs to have data so they can apply their efforts into those areas or to those people or the subjects. And we worked on dashboards. We worked on these kinds of tools, and they were miserable failure because we did not look at that from their point of view, the metaphors there. And then also technical literacy is another one. What we think is literacy versus what happens in another culture or country are two different things. So the government actually has invested over their money to fund test the efficacy of mental health interventions using mobile technology. So if we kind of went global, because we are having certain constraints right now, which will probably go away perhaps when the next administration comes in, but that is one of the opportunities that we have other than private sector and not-for-profit.
And Eric, I'm going to turn over the last half of that question to you, because you also have led a new national institute around critical, I guess, resources. And so within that space, like, do you feel like we also need, because I know that's at the faculty level, at kind of a multi-university or and also a multi-school level, do we also need to change what we're doing at the undergrad level to meet those needs, or even the grad level?
I'm sure the answer is yes. And I guess what I would ask is, I think that in all of the moments that we're facing right now, we need to ask ourselves, how do we go forward with, I think a really simple response would be, how do we continue to look at the real world? All of the pieces in the real world, the policy, what each discipline brings to our understandings of that and its limitations, as well as technology's role in it, and one thing we've been talking about in our group is engineers design systems. Social scientists, and I might be using the wrong word. I've now been having such interdisciplinary conversations that I'm like, is it the humanities? Is it the social sciences? But that the social sciences study it, right? So what does that even mean, right? When we have conversations in our group of, well, I don't know, like there's questions about, okay, here's a bridge, right? And I've been using the explanation that engineers design the bridge. We don't know what the future holds. We have some, probabilistic understandings of what the future holds. I'm about to go back to like decision theory. And we try to design the bridge to be resilient to, in the best of situations, we try to design the bridge to be resilient to various external forces, a boat going into it, a hurricane, or otherwise. And I think as we think about the future of government or the future of networks and collusion across nefarious and other networks, that we need to ask the question, it's a time to come together. It's a time to ask, what can each of us learn from each other? And it's a time for humbleness in saying, what also don't we know and where are we wrong?
All right, thank you very much. And let's thank our panelists.